I don't think there's anybody that fishes that doesn't like to catch a smallmouth. If there is, they've probably fallen and hit their head. Okay, they need to find another sport, because I will tell you, smallmouth is just a phenomenal, beautiful fish to catch. I catch smallmouth on a regular basis, particularly in the rivers. There are some in the lakes around this part of the country. Most of them down in the Table Rock area. There are smallmouth on Stockton. There's some up in other parts of the state, but primarily Table Rock and the rivers in this part of the country, right? So what are some of the bodies of water you all fish in this area? What are some of the bodies of water we talked about? So I can kind of tailor the bait and stuff to wherever you're at.
Buffalo River.
Buffalo River, Bull Shoals.
I mean, there's Bull Shoals, but we're mostly Buffalo.
Okay, okay. Where else, everybody? Is anybody not from Missouri, Arkansas? Anybody outside of Arkansas or Missouri?
Illinois River.
Illinois River, okay. Man, good fishing up there. Matter of fact, not that far up, but on the Mississippi, was that Fishing for Freedom? Quincy, you've been up there. Pretty impressive area to fish. I got a lot of friends that fish that part of the country, the northeast part of Missouri, on the Missouri or the Mississippi. Of course, you got the Merrimack that runs up there a little bit. But anywhere down here you want to fish on the river, you kind of got to watch your water conditions. I tailor my day on the river or the lake to what the conditions are. Okay, you may go to a body of water and fish this weekend and catch them on a particular type of bait, and you're like, man, this bait's going to work every time I go to that body of water. You go out there next weekend and you don't catch a thing, or you catch one fish using the same bait, the same spot, and you're sitting there scratching your head, well, why did I not catch fish on this river or this lake or pond this weekend like I did last weekend? The question you have to ask yourself is, what is the conditions of the water at the time you fished it? Was it clear? Was it stained? Was it high? Was it low? We all know until the last month, we've been pretty dry in Missouri. Okay, I think we pretty much got this drought kicked in the butt. All right, but we were in a drought here the last couple months, from the spring all the way through most of the summer until a couple weeks ago. The Gasconade, and some of my friends here that fish the Gasconade and the Piney and those rivers up in that area, you were literally having to walk across some of the shoals and the sandbars because you just couldn't float across it. Last month, me and my son were fishing and canoeing down the Piney in areas where we wouldn't even have to paddle, and we were literally having to paddle the whole time and or get out and lift the canoe and walk it over different areas because you just couldn't get through. The water was so low. What that did for us in that particular low water situation was it allowed me to see what was on the bottom of that river that I didn't know was there before. I didn't see that particular boulder that's sitting in the water. Now those boulders are not going to move, but what moves in the water besides the fish? Gravel and sandbars move, okay? So you have to kind of be cautious about what's underneath that water. So you might know that there's a gravel or sandbar right here, but guess what? If we had the rains down here like we did over in the other part of the state last night, those gravel and sandbars are going to, it's going to change the channel of the river. So you got to really be careful and watch out for those channels. What that also does for you, not for navigation or safety, but does that change what it does for the fish? Oh, you betcha. You betcha. Matter of fact, you can go down here in a little bit, and we can do it after the seminar if you want. I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about. Down here, you've got kind of a wider area, probably about 50 to 60 yards of water, and it doesn't look like it's moving that fast because it's a little bit deeper. But as it goes over those shoals down here where you start seeing the ripples in the rock, it looks like that water picks up and just starts cruising, doesn't it? Well, it's probably moving the same speed. The river's not like doing 20 here and 10 here. It's not going to put on the brakes and go, oh, there's a rock shoal, I'm going to slow down a little bit. But in some of the wider areas, it could do that. So you got to watch what the water is doing itself. Same thing we do on the big lakes. You've got to watch the conditions to figure out what kind of bait you're going to fish. Okay, I was telling a story here a little while ago to a couple folks about a Z-crawl. How many of you know what a Z-crawl is? It's kind of like a beaver. It's similar. It's a little bit bigger. They're made by Zoom. They're phenomenal baits. I absolutely love that bait. I'm a huge Zoom fan. And I'm not sponsored by Zoom. I actually just like their baits. I've been using them for years. Okay, the Z-crawl, for 2 years in a row, I caught all my tournament winning fish, and I caught the majority of my fish on a Z-crawl, either on a Texas rig, a wobblehead, or using it as a trailer on a jig. For 2 years. Well, for 3 months this year, I threw the Z-crawl and couldn't get bit. Not even a look. And I don't know what it is. I'm using the same rod, same line, same color, same locations, but I'm not getting bit. One of the things is, number one, our water conditions have severely changed. Our lakes are extremely low up until about last week. Truman is under pool. Lake of the Ozarks is under pool. Pomme de Terre was under pool. So you look at all these bodies of water, I mean, they are crystal clear. I mean, our lakes in Missouri are kind of clear anyway. But right now, I mean, it's clear to the point where I can see 10, 15 feet down in Truman Lake. I'm seeing stumps on Truman that I didn't know existed unless you saw them on the grass. I mean, there's spots on the lake right now where you could run on plane to go up the river channel, because I like fishing the skinny water. Okay, so it may not be this part of the river because I can't get my boat that far up. But when I'm going up the James from the Table Rock area, I'm going as far as that nitro will go. Now, when you got a big 225 Optimax Mercury on the back, you're not going very far up the river unless it's a jet. Okay, it's not a jet. My boat is not designed for the river. So we go as far as that boat will let us go. Okay, because I'm telling you, even though that's a lot of beautiful water to fish, that clear water, when conditions change, especially when it rains, you'll see a lot of guys run up the river. So river fishing can be phenomenal almost all year round. I absolutely love it. I will fish the Piney. I mean, we got guys here in the crowd right now that'll fish that river. You'll be breaking ice putting your boat in the water. I've fished on my boat last year with 2 inches of snow on the top of the deck of the boat. Just this last spring, I had a 1/4 inch of sleet, ice, rain, snow on the deck of the boat fishing a solo pro tournament down here on Table Rock in February. You know, it was just miserable weather. I don't know if y'all remember February of this year. It was, our weather here was bipolar. I mean, one day it was 65 degrees and you're wearing, you know, just a regular shirt, and then the next day you're in full Gore-Tex 100-mile-an-hour gear, whatever you got, you know, just trying to keep your fingers from falling off while casting. All right, so the reason why I harp on these things at different bodies of water is you really got to understand the conditions that you're fishing. Once you understand the conditions, you can kind of gauge what the bass are going to be doing. If you don't know what the bass are doing, you really don't know how to prepare to fish that body of water. Now, what I want to caution you on, and we all do it, and I got a good friend of mine that posted something on the internet last night or the night before about fishing a tournament up in Indiana. He said, I was set to fish this tournament based off the conditions. I went out and he prepped his baits. He pulled the baits he was going to fish primarily, had them ready in the boat for speed and accuracy, you know, had everything pre-tied. He's all set to go. Well, guess what? When he got there, things changed. The water had changed. The barometric pressure had changed. A lot of things had changed with the weather that particular time. So when he got up there to fish, the baits he had set up were not working. And it was just because he was trying to fish a different elevation of the water column, if you will. We all know about the thermocline. The rivers, it's not that important because, number one, it's not that deep, okay? Because with it moving, it's got a lot of oxygen because it's moving all the time. But when you start getting in the real deep pockets of water, you got to understand what those fish are going to be doing and where. Are they holding tight to cover? Okay? Are they holding tight to cover? Are they going shallow? Are they running the shoals? Are they up in the rocks? You know, are they hiding, ambushing shad in deeper water, or are they out there kind of hitting craws? Understanding what the weather, what that water's doing allows me to prepare for that particular body of water. So what I've done, kind of set up for this particular seminar, being geared towards kayak anglers, canoes, you know, more skinny water. We call it skinny water down on the river, which is absolutely a blast to fish. Sometimes I prefer to do that better than the lakes, and I mean, I got some friends here that'll fish both, you know, big water and skinny water. It's fun. Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple things. What I have laid out on the table here is exactly what I would take to the river or some skinny water if I was going to fish a particular tournament, let's say probably this weekend. Now, with the water's changing, is that water stained more now than it was yesterday? We've had how many inches of rain? We didn't have what? I think we've had half an inch of rain down here in this part of the state. Well, in Waynesville, we had 5 inches of rain last night. But it didn't do anything to the Gasconade yet, because when we crossed the Gasconade on the I-44 this morning, it was still clear, maybe a couple inches of rise, but it wasn't even muddied up yet. It wasn't even muddied up yet, not stained at all. It was still fairly clear. So it looked good, but I'll bet when I go home this afternoon and cross it back over, it's probably going to be stained and come up a little bit. So that literally is going to change what type of bait you fish and what parts of that river you're going to fish during that day. Now, when you go out, are you guys, now most of you in the crowd, because I want to tailor this to you guys, are you fishing tournaments on the river? Kayak tournaments, canoe tournaments, whatever? Or you're just out there fun fishing? Okay, so how much time do you have? Roughly 5 hours, 8 hours?
Full day if I make it to the river.
Okay, a full day if you make it to the river. Now tournaments are what? 8 hours for you guys? Kayak tournaments normal 8 hours? So you've got 8 hours to put a good limit of fish in a boat or on whichever way you're doing your tournament weigh-in. We actually take our fish to a weigh-in. I know kayak tournaments are a little bit different. Doesn't make any sense to put a live well in there. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do that. So you do it differently, but you still need to get a certain size or weight of fish. You guys do it by inches, right? Okay, so we do it by weight on the lakes. You guys do it by inches, but still, you're trying to get as many as possible. The more you get, the better chance you have of taking home that check. That's the bottom line. You at least want to pay for the tournament, because you all know that it's not cheap to fish in any type of tournament. You've got your funds to get there, your boat maintenance, your tackle. I mean, there's a lot of things, plus your entry fees. You know, you at least want to get that back. So why wouldn't you want to set up your day on that body of water for success? And that's where I'm going to show you what I would throw. Not necessarily that it would work, because I've gone out and hammered them, and I've gone out the next day and not caught a thing, except for a sunburn. Two things that I will be throwing today. Now I might change the color of the actual critter crawl. This is a setup right here that I like to use. Number one, the Carbon Light, Johnny Moore's Carbon Light Bass Pro rods. I use these almost exclusively. I absolutely love these rods. My wrist, from years of abuse on the lake and doing other things in the military, my arms and wrists are kind of sore, and it hurts to kind of move that. Some of you gentlemen that are probably getting up in your 40s and 50s and 60s realize that your hands and wrists don't move as well as they used to as you get older. So this reel right here, and I'll let you hold on to it, I mean, it's like a feather. I mean, these things are absolutely light. I mean, just hold on to that right there. It beats those old 70s, 80s, 90s era rods that felt like you were holding a brick in your hand, and then you add your bait to it. I mean, it was just crazy. So they're light. My setups, as you can see on this particular spool, even though I'm fishing a finesse technique with this right here, this is a spot remover, shaky head hook and weight. Now this particular jig head, the spot remover, I like the spot removers, okay? And I like this particular setup. Now I have changed the color just a little bit on this critter crawl because of changing conditions or forage in the water, okay? Because your bait or your forage is not going to stay the absolute same color 365 days a year. For anybody that knows anything about craws or lizards or any type of aquatic bait or forage that bass feed on, those things change colors. And I'll talk about how to change that real quickly on the water that will kind of help set you up for success. But this particular setup is one of my all-time favorites. When I first got to Missouri from Texas, about 12, 13 years ago, I was fishing tournaments in Texas, just starting out in tournament fishing, not real big into it. And then I got stationed up here at Fort Leonard Wood, and I had some friends who were like, man, there's so many tournaments up here. We got so much water. I'm like, yeah, but it ain't Texas. If you haven't fished Sam Rayburn and Toledo Bend and all these other beautiful lakes down there around Central Texas or Louisiana, you really don't know what fishing's all about. So I'm Mr. Cocky coming from Texas, right? Because I'd spent a long time down there, stationed down there and fishing, catching good fish. And then I come up here to Missouri, and I'm like, yeah, this ain't nothing. So my first tournament in Missouri was on Palm de Terre. My first tournament in Missouri was on Palm de Terre. And it was a night tournament because I got here in June. And literally the first weekend that I got here that I was in a tournament. So I kind of paired up with some guys that I became close friends with, and they got me involved with the Tri-County Bass Club up in St. Roberts. And I got paired up with a guy, and he said, you know what? He goes, you're new to Missouri, you're new to fishing this type of water. Our lakes are pretty clear. I want to show you a technique, and this is the exact one he showed me right here with this critter crawl, Zoom critter crawl, okay? Chigger crawl, my bad. The chigger crawl is a little bit bigger. This is a critter crawl. The critters are smaller. Now this is a baby critter crawl, okay? The full size is just a little bit bigger. It's about an inch bigger. This bait right here I laughed at it when I first saw it. And I looked at him, because fishing down in Texas, we're fishing 10-inch worms, black and blue, plum, tequila sunrise, on big 6-7 odd hooks with an ounce bait. And I'm like, we're not catching nothing with that. What are you doing? We're not fishing for trout. I mean, literally, I was like, are we fishing for trout, or are we in a bass tournament? He goes, oh no, somebody's gonna pull 18 pounds on Pomme de Terre tonight on this bait. And I was like, you're crazy. So we go out there, and I kid you not, the first 10 minutes in the tournament, he's flipping this around the banks and pulls in like a 3 or 4 pounder. I don't remember, it's been a long time, but it was over a 2-pound fish. And I looked at him, I said, did you just change that bait? He goes, no, it's the one I put on, I told you to put on at the ramp before we launched. So I'm holding that bait up and I look at it, I'm like, how in the heck is that gonna catch a largemouth bass or even a smallmouth on a big body of water like that? And then I started doing some research and I started doing some thinking about this part of the country, and I looked at the forage and I said, I'll be doggone. So I went to this bait. Now I don't fish this exclusively, I'll tell you that. There's a lot of other good baits out there, but this is a good finesse technique that works great on the river. I'm telling you right now. The Gasconade a few years ago, me and a good buddy of mine, Jim Baker, went up to, we go out of the Jerome Access up there off D and 28, or D, which is not far from the Veterans Bridge at 28 over in Pulaski County, okay, on the Gasconade. And we would take his boat out and we'd fish for about 8 or 9 hours as long as we could stand it, which was pretty much forever because we both like to fish. And we would throw tubes and critter crawls and we would load the boat almost every time we went out. Now we'd release them real quick because we weren't in a tournament. We were just fun fishing. But he was kind of introducing me to that type of river fishing that I was not accustomed to, because I was used to fishing deeper rivers, depending on where you go around the country. Now our rivers here are fairly shallow. Now, unless we get a lot of bad weather, right? Then the rain starts going up. So this is one of those techniques I like to use. So then after that, fishing the river and catching good smallmouth with it, and I've seen guys catch largemouth, I said, well, why don't I go and fish this bait in a tournament last year, and I won the tournament and took big bass using that bait and a Z-Cross. My first keeper came on this, and people were like, well, look at how small. I mean, if you look at that hook profile and that weight, I mean, there is nothing there. And people are like, how are you catching big bass on that? I'm like, real easy. Once you learn the finesse technique and how to flip it up in there and how to work it over cover, it is phenomenal, because it just kind of creeps up on the bass. I mean, think about the rivers. If it doesn't have a lot of current like it hasn't had recently, that bait kind of just sits there, right? You got to really work it. Okay, so if it's a rapid movement, you can get a reaction bite. But what I like about that water is I can take this bait. It doesn't make hardly any splash when it goes in the water if you're presenting it right. I just kind of let it flutter down because it's going to take a second to get to the bottom because it doesn't have a lot of weight. And then it just sits there. It could be sitting right next to a bass, you don't even know it. And then I flip it up over that branch and that cover or a boulder, and all of a sudden it's a reaction bite because he's like, oh man, that crawl just tried to crawl over my head. It works. Good bait. And there's all kinds of different finesse techniques that you can use, but that's probably my all-time favorite, especially on some of the rivers around here for smallmouth. Smallmouth absolutely love these crawls. We start looking at colors. These are two things that will go with me on every tournament or every fun fishing day on the lake or the river. These things right here are absolutely awesome because I can take any color of bait and change its color, its presentation, and I can also add some garlic. These are garlic sticks, okay? I mean, they're great. Red, if you find forage in the water that's got a little red in it, I can change that color and put a little red on it. I can put chartreuse. You can't go wrong with that color right there, chartreuse. You can't go wrong with that color right there. This part of the country, on the river and or the lakes, you take any bait you got and just put a little bit on that tail, a little bit on those into those crawl legs, and I'm telling you, that can increase your presentation and the look that the bass are going to see when you're fishing it. Plus, if you have a little stained water or it's not as clear as you're accustomed to, adds a little more color to it. It's bright, fish can see it. Plus, it's got a little garlic in it. A lot of people swear by different types of scents or bait attractors. I think it holds the bait in the fish's mouth long enough for you to feel it and hook the actual fish. Now, I'm going to talk to you about kind of a phenomenon that's been going on this year. I don't know what they call it. I call it bass that are finicky bass eating. I'll talk about that here in a minute. And this is something that I use to help those finicky bass hold that bait in their mouth long enough that I can really feel that bite and set the hook. How many times have you had a bass pick up the tail of the worm or the bait and swim off with it? And you set the hook, but guess what? You bring your bait in and all the way up to the hook, the bait's gone. Except for what's right there at the hook. Because all they did was bite down on it and they swam off. They just suck it in, they hold on, and they swim off. And you may not feel it until they actually move. Then you're like, oh, I got a fish on there. So wham, you set the hook, too late. It was in the mouth too long and you didn't catch it. Okay? These things will help kind of hold that, I think. I'm not a biologist, but I've been told by people that have been in this business a long time, and I've seen it. I can literally tell you I've probably had fish that I've caught simply because they kept it in their mouth longer because of the garlic. And you can do this on the river too. I mean, how many of y'all have seen those coffee scented baits, coffee baits? They sell them at Bass Pro, they sell them at Walmart. I mean, I think you can get them at Walmart now. You can get the coffee scented baits. You know, and of course power bait, we're all familiar with power bait. Berkeley power bait's been around for years. What do you think? You know, that fish gets that in their mouth and it gives them that one little extra second to think about spitting it out or you setting a hook. So that might take that 1 second that actually helps you. We went over the shaky head, finesse type. Let's go over some different types of tubes. All right. Another great technique. Oh, look at you. I almost stepped on you. We don't want to get you hurt. All right, so different types of baits that I use different brands. I'm not exclusive to one, I'll tell you that right now. Every bait company out there makes a bait that you might find a custom or work better than others. Now, I know that there are some guys that will say, I'm only a Zoom guy or I'm only a Strike King guy. Okay, great. I like using a little bit of everything because I can do different presentations with different type of baits. Sometimes, you know, you've heard this before in the past about confidence baits, right? Everybody in this crowd that fishes has a bait that they catch more fish on and they're more comfortable fishing probably all year round. Am I correct? Everybody's probably got that one bait you like better than another. Those are your confidence baits because you're good at it. You feel good with those baits. You just have fun with it. You catch fish. It makes you build your confidence. Well, anglers that fish tournaments for money, we also like those baits. And I'll tell you, this is one, I actually had this one on the Gasconade, and these are some of the ones we actually caught better fish on the Gasconade. The power baits, it's actually in a package of a chigger crawl because the tubes that I was using were in a Ziploc bag I had specially made by a guy. Okay, this tube right here, it's called a puke color. This is called puke. It's a cross between green pumpkin and, well, I guess puke, let's just be honest.
Baby crap yellow.
Yeah, baby crap yellow, baby food, whatever. This is my go-to smallmouth bait on a river right here. This color in this tube right here, and it can be this size, this is about an inch size. I'll go all the way up to the 2-inch depending on the depth of the water, how much water we've got in the river. Now I'll tell you the size of the bait and the color of the bait is all based off of how the water's moving. Is it fast moving? Is it stained? The darker the stain or the darker the water, the darker the bait. Let's just be honest. The darker the sky, the darker the buzz bait. And I'll use a buzz bait as a good example. Okay, and I'm going to show you why I picked the black one for today. Okay, so these tubes right here, absolutely phenomenal. Now you'll ask, what type of rig can I put this tube on? Well, I can put this tube on just about any type of hook or any type of weight you can think of. Tubes are so versatile with what type of jig head you want to use or any type of bait you want to use, period. I have used on my 2-inch tubes Texas rig. I have literally Texas rigged a 2-inch tube and caught fish. I put them on big half-ounce jig heads, quarter-ounce jig heads. Matter of fact, I have some jig heads here I brought for a specific reason. So a long time ago, hell, it's probably been 10 years ago now, me and a couple buddies pitched in some money and we decided that we wanted to get on Jan's Netcraft. Anybody make their own baits? You can get on NetBait or Jan's Netcraft. Okay, Jan's Netcraft is a company that builds or sells blanks for crankbaits. They sell molds for weights, hooks, all kinds of stuff, and you can buy good hooks through that company. So we bought a bunch of weight, we got a bunch of stuff, and we literally went out and we made some of our own jig heads. Okay, we made some of our own because we knew that if you're not pitching in there in the cover and actually catching fish in those, let's see, what do we want to call it? I was talking to a couple guys over here about a little while ago, in that thick cover. How many people are afraid to pitch up into a tree or cables around a dock, anything like that? How many are afraid to do that? Some people are very afraid. Well, guess where the bass are? Your bigger fish are going to be in those areas, even on the river. You start looking at these eddies, and if they got boulders in there, or you got laydowns and trees and stumps for the guys that are fishing the river, you got to look for those spots. For those of you that do fish the river, you can probably agree that most of your better fish come from laydowns, right? Or some type of structure inside the water. Let's just be honest. I mean, I absolutely love fishing those areas. I'm not going to fish a wide open area that has nothing on it. How many of y'all have watched MLF fishing on TV? How many have watched a FLW series or a Bass Elite Series tournament on the TV or seen them? Everybody's probably watched one or two in their day, right? And you see these guys that are out there and there's nothing there. They're like 300 yards from a bank. There's nothing there, and you've got a angler out there with a rod fishing. And you're like, what the heck is he doing out in the middle of that deep water? Well, yeah, he might be out there in that deep water, but guess what? There's something in that area that brings the fish to it, i.e. structure. It could be boulders. It could be an old road bed that's got a grass line on it. It can have all kinds of things out there that attract those fish. Well, those type of areas is kind of what I'm talking about with these type of hooks. Okay? I'm not afraid to use these types that I make with my own lead or my own type of weight and my own hooks. I'm not afraid to lose them. I don't want to lose them because I don't want to leave it in Mother Nature. I hate leaving anything in the lake. And what I take is what I bring home. Now, sometimes when you're in 30 foot of water, if you snag something and break it off, you're not getting it back. I got that. But the less we can leave in the bottom of the lake or the river, the better. Okay? For conservation reasons. But real simple mold, these things have a little barb that comes up from the lead. I can throw a tube on this right here. Now, definitely it's not going to be weedless. It's not going to be weedless. So you got to really pay attention to what type of structure or cover that you're fishing, depending on the type of technique that you're going to use or hook. Okay, so if you're going to be in that thick cover, you're going to want some type of weedless feature to it, whether it be your little fiberglass or some type of fiber arms on there, or the wire type. He's got some wire type over here. It's just a wire that comes up over the top of the hook, so that when it hits a piece of cover, it's not going to like grab onto the tree. It's going to kind of just glide over the top, and it's still inside the water. Well, if I throw this into a submerged tree, most likely, if I'm not paying attention to where it's at in that tree, this is going to catch on something. So you want something that's going to kind of keep it weedless. If I'm in deeper water and I know my structure is a big boulder down there in 10 foot, 5 foot, 12 foot, 20 foot of water, I will use an exposed hook like this on my tube. Okay, I have no problem doing that, not at all. So tubes are absolutely phenomenal. I'm telling you, that puke color is a phenomenal color for smallmouth specifically. If I'm fishing for smallmouth, you can guarantee some of that puke or green pumpkin with chartreuse on the back if I'm fishing for smallmouth. All right, so let's talk about the topwater for a second, because I promised you a minute ago that we talk about the buzzbait. Now, some people will say, what is that buzzbait going to do for me on the river? How many of y'all have thrown a buzzbait on the river? Raise your hand. Anybody? You caught fish on them? That's why you throw a buzzbait on the river, because you catch fish on them. Some people get intimidated by different types of baits. Now, this particular buzzbait, it has a clacker on it. When that comes through the water, not only do you have the sound and the buzz of the blades actually churning in the water, you also have this little metal clacker. So when it comes by, it actually makes a pretty good clunking sound. I'm telling you, it drives bass absolutely insane. And it will trigger a reaction bite, because they look at it and they go, it's not just a buzzbait with that little churn on the top. They look at it and go, what is that noise? Holy crap, I got to cut that out. It's bothering me. I'm trying to take a nap. So they'll come up and they'll just hammer it. Now, on buzzbaits, a lot of guys will not use a trailer hook on a buzzbait because they think it might get caught up in some of the cover. That's true. Depends. The buzzbait is a little bit different than a spinnerbait because its wire is a little bit longer in the back. Its wire is a little bit longer. So you can get away without using a trailer hook on a buzzbait. I really believe that. This particular buzzbait, I have a trailer hook attached to it. Okay, this is just me. And I will tell you why I have that trailer hook on this particular bait. This bait is black and it's got the clacker. So I use this in dark water, stained, or with wind. Okay, I will use it for that because it's got a darker presentation. Now the reason why I have the trailer hook on there, number one, is to help me catch that bass that hammers it. Gives me something else for it to get snagged onto in its mouth, right? But I will take a trailer. What I like are those single tail grubs. Take a 1-inch single tail grub. I like white. And I'll put a white grub on the back of a black buzzbait. I'll put a white grub on the back of it. That gives it another little bit presentation. Gives it a little bit more noise, a little bit more movement in the water, and it makes it a little bit longer. So now when the bait, when the fish see it from down below, it's almost that long instead of just being this long, or they only see this little part is all they see on top of the water. You would be surprised at what smallmouth will attack. I had a smallmouth early this year. It was actually one of the good fish I caught down on Table Rock. It was a Joe Bass event. Anybody heard of Joe Bass? Joe Bass Team Trail, part of the Bassmaster Team Trail. Well, that thing is kicking off huge in this state. Matter of fact, the last 2 anglers to go to the Bassmaster Classics from Joe Bass or from the Bassmaster Team Trail were both anglers from right here in Missouri. So with that particular bait, the other top water I like to use is a spook. This right here to me is one of my all-time favorite. Matter of fact, I would rather fish this over a buzzbait all day long. The only thing with this type of topwater bait is this bait you have to fish a little bit slower. It's not just a throw and, you know, retrieve it back to the boat. Now you can vary your retrieves with the buzzbait. I got that. This one, you can also vary some things you do with it. So I fish jerk baits on the lake when the water gets cold, when it gets slow, when the bite slows down, you know, because the fish will slow down. They'll get a little more lethargic depending on the type of year or the time of year and the seasons, right? They'll slow down. Their metabolism slows down so they don't eat as much. Well, we're about ready to go into a feeding frenzy on the lake because the bass are going to start feeding on shad prior to the fall when the lake's getting really cold and that thermocline turning over, okay? So with that, I'm going to throw a jerk bait, and I'll guarantee you I'm going to throw one of these in the morning. If you fish any part of Table Rock or any type of the rivers that go into the lakes, this around those cedars, you know what I'm talking about? You can see them on Table Rock when you drive over the bridge. You see those cedars that are sticking up out of the lake? I find the meatiest portion of that cedar, I'll use my graphs and I'll look and see and I'll look around, I'll find out where they're at, and I'll take this bait and I'll just slowly work it around those trees. I had a 4-pound smallmouth come out of the water and knock this 10 feet in the air and scare the living crap out of me one day. He almost came in the boat because it was almost to the boat. So I started to say that telephone pole, threw it out there, and the cedar was between me and there. So I'm looking around, I'm looking for other things to fish. I'm looking around, I'm walking the dog, I'm slowing down, I'm popping it, I'm doing different things, right? Then all of a sudden, my line loaded up and it went limp, and I looked up and I could hear the splash, and I looked over and that smallmouth was out of the water, bending and turning. It was a beautiful thing. If that would have been on TV, that would have been the most beautiful picture or video you ever saw, okay? But that fish came out of the water and bent, and I wish it had been on camera. And that bait, this is the one I was throwing. I blame it on you, hooks, okay? So this bait was like 10 feet out of the water. I mean, he hammered it that hard. How he didn't get these 2 hooks in his mouth, I have no idea. But it was a beautiful sight. That smallmouth it broke my heart. But it was beautiful to see, because I'm going to free the fighter anyway. I'm going to put it back after the weigh-in, because that was an actual tournament, so I needed it for a weigh-in. But some other baits that I like to use, and these are the ending of the baits that I like to use on the river. Everything I've got on that table is what I would pack in a box if I was going to go out for the day on the river. Small square bill crankbaits are absolutely phenomenal. The other bait that we used that day, I was telling you, I was with my buddy Jim up on the Gasconade. When we were throwing those tubes, we were also throwing this right here. This one happens to be a Strike King KVD 1.5 square bill crankbait. And what I've done is I've changed the back hook to a triple grip. Okay, I've changed that back hook to a triple grip. I don't really care much about the front, but the back ones are what I like to change the most. Number one, it saves me money on those crankbaits by changing just one hook. Some of them I'll change two. Now this particular one right here, this is one by Jeff Tatum's 19 Delta Baits right back there. I got this bait when it was in prototype a while back when he was starting to make that color and make these type of baits. And when he first started, he wasn't using the triple grip hooks, if you will. He was using the round bend regular treble hooks. And he switched that over to the triple grips. I honestly think that these hooks with that little extra bend in there keep the fish on long enough for you to get it out of the water, whether you have a net or not. Now, luckily for most of us, we're allowed to have a net in whatever tournament we fish. You guys are in the kayak tournaments, right? You can have a net? Okay. Well, on my boat, it's a little bit further off the water, so I got to kind of lay down and kind of got to get up underneath there. And I like grabbing fish, but at the same time, if I miss grabbing that fish or that fish kind of jumps before it gets in the net, they'll throw the hooks. The reason why I talk about that is these triple grips will actually help keep that fish on a little bit longer. And number one, if you notice, these hooks kind of bend in a little bit towards the shank of the hook. It's not out a little bit further, so it gives me that one little 1/4 inch more space that I can throw this into some cover. I will throw this around laydowns, logs, trees, bushy trees, rocks all day long and feel confident that I'm going to pop it out of there. Now, have I lost one? You betcha. I've lost more than one 1.5 type square bill crankbait. But this one right here, as you can see, that bill's pretty scraped up. Okay, the paint's kind of getting rubbed off there. And there's his initials right there, Jeff Tatum, 19 Delta Baits. I use that on a regular basis. These baits right here are phenomenal for smallmouth. And he's got some right back there. His lovely wife and daughter back there, they will square you away with different types of baits in the OSA craw color. All right, so that's a must-have. Probably one of my all-time favorites for the big water and in the skinny water on the rivers. In the big water, especially around the banks or points early in the morning when the shad start popping and the fish start feeding off the shad, is a simple number one. This is another 1.5 square bill. This bait right here with the shad color and the black on it. I don't care if it's in dark water or it's in water that's really clear. This bait will work well as well. I really like this type of square bill crankbait. The reason why I like these square bills, you notice I got 3 of them, is because when you fish a skinnier water, you don't want a bait that runs down to 10, 12 feet, because then you are going to get caught up. If I'm fishing the river, this little bill on these square bills, these are perfect. These are 3 to 5 feet. So if I run into an eddy that's got 10 foot, I can crank down a little bit faster, or I can run my rod down in the water, and I can make up for that 1 to 5 foot difference, right? Well, if I'm just kind of casually cruising it through the water, this is only going to go 3 foot deep. It's not that bad, so I can still cover good water. The biggest thing with a square bill is you want it to hit the bottom of the lake or the river. You want it to drag on the bottom of that cover. I've had people say, well, I don't like ruining my baits because they're dragging the rocks. I'm like, then don't buy that bait, because that bait is designed to drag those rocks. That's what it's for. Now, are you going to break bills off? You betcha. If you're not breaking baits, breaking off fish, you're not fishing hard enough. Okay? You're going to lose hooks, you're going to lose weights, you're going to lose baits, you're going to break a favorite crankbait. I mean, I've lost $20 crankbaits before. It hurts. Because I still work for a living. I haven't made any money at fishing, trust me. If I made money at fishing, I'd be in another part of the country, probably in a tournament right now. But I do it for fun. I fish the local stuff with these guys around here. I love it. I love fishing in Missouri, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas, of course, and other parts of the country. But if you have any questions for the next little bit, feel free to come up and hit me up and ask questions about a particular type of bait or technique. I'll be willing to share that with you. I've got a lot of friends that won't take other people fishing because they don't want to show them their spots. I have people I know, not really friends, I call them more colleagues, if you will, in tournaments that are afraid to have a co-angler because they don't want people to see their spots. And they won't talk to you about the bait they use, and they won't show it to you, and they won't show you the type of hook that they use. Me and my buddies always say, you can give somebody the bait all day long, but they still have to go catch the fish. They still have to go catch it. Okay, so I don't think it's an unfair advantage to tell you that if I won a tournament last weekend on Palm de Terre on this crankbait, I'll tell you, yep, cut them on that one, man. Here you go, have it. Good luck, go catch them. I want people to catch fish, just not in a tournament against me. So if you're fishing a tournament, we'll talk afterwards. I'm just kidding. Anytime. I do a lot of seminars at Bass Pro Shop a couple times a month. Season's kind of dwindling to an end. They got a big tournament on Table Rock. Next month is the Joe Bass Invitational. That gets us down to Florida if we get in place in that one. If we go through the one in Florida, we go to a 6-man fish off, and whoever wins that one goes to the Bassmaster Classic this year. So I'm hoping that I can add the Classic thing up here on my jersey. I'm kind of hoping for that, but I also am humble enough to know that I'm just a little guy in a big state with a lot of good anglers that I've learned from that I've got to go beat. They're tough to beat, I'm going to be honest with you. Okay, because they've taught me everything I know. Any questions? You can hit me up afterwards. Go ahead.
How do you decide on your colors on your spooks?
On the spooks, darker the water, darker the spook. I mean, that's literally how simple I keep it. The buzz bait's the same thing. Top water, the darker the water or the darker the sky, the darker the bait. If it's bluebird, clear skies, I'll go a white, chartreuse, or that type of color. Same thing with the baits. Now, the crankbaits, the darker ones work better on the rivers and they work better in the muddier water. But that black and yellow right there, I mean, that is a crush color any time of the year. It's funny because Ryan asked me a couple weeks ago, he goes, what do you want to call this thing? And I'm like, bronze crush. Yeah, bronze backs, that beautiful smallmouth fish. And I'm like, when we go out there, we want to crush it. We want to throw a bait that's going to crush those fish so we can take a good picture and then free the fighter and get them back in the water, right? Put them back in the water, let them live for other people to catch. Okay, but that was it. That crush color right there, I call this the crush color because I can go out there and catch them on this bait right now. Now that I've said that, we can go down there right now and not catch nothing, but we'll blame it on the weather. But I can't even blame it on the weather because actually, most of the better fish I've caught in tournaments I've won have been in pretty nasty weather. Pretty nasty weather, so I can't even say that. Answer your question?
Yep, thank you.
Any other questions?
You always throw a clacker on the buzz?
Nope. Sure don't. If it's clear water and calm, i.e. no wind at all, I'll throw one. I'll throw a white one without a clacker and no trailer. Yep. Because I want to slow down that presentation because then it's just out of whack. The conditions kind of tailor your bait. Kind of like when I was talking about the beginning in the seminar today. The conditions of the water are going to dictate what you throw and how you throw it. It's just going to happen. If you got bluebird skies and there's not an ounce of wind and you look out over that lake and it is solid glass and there is nothing moving, I mean all there is horseflies. How many of y'all been on a lake and been bit by a horsefly? Woo, man, especially you guys on the river. I don't know how you do it in them kayaks. Being that low to the water, getting all the flies in there. Boy, when that's all you see and you're fighting off horseflies, you got to slow down and go to a finesse technique. You got to go to a finesse technique. But if they're not biting on a finesse technique, then just go crazy, look in your box and go, you know what? That's not supposed to catch fish this time of year in this type of water, but I'm going to throw it anyway. And you'd be surprised how sometimes just throwing something different than everybody else. You know, if you got 10 guys running down the same bank throwing the same bait, find out what they're throwing and throw opposite. If they're throwing a little 1/4 ounce finesse, shaky head, 6-inch worm, straight tail or finesse worm, then throw on a full-size brush hog and start baking that thing with garlic and color and a big weight, crash it up in the water. You'd be surprised. Sometimes that'll catch a bass off guard and they'll eat it. So they'll eat it.
One of the things from kayak fishing is that you only have 1 or 2 rods with you.
Right.
So changing baits when you have to retie is a little bit of a deterrent. I'm hesitant to do that. Do you use snap swivels any? I haven't felt good about it when I've used them before. I didn't feel like that for some reason the bait presentation was right or hookup was as good.
I don't use snap swivels, okay? I do not. But I don't say that you shouldn't, because I know a guy right now, his name is John, he lives in South Carolina, he used to work with us over at the fort. This guy would, only take a couple rods anytime he went fishing. And he had snap swivels on the end of it, so he could quickly change out his baits. And you know what? Almost every time we went to the lake, he embarrassed me. I mean, literally just caught him and I didn't, or vice versa. And I said, you know what? I'll never argue a snap swivel again. It's funny you mentioned that, because there are some guys, I actually know some pro anglers that will use certain types of hookups like that so they can quickly get their baits on and off the line if they're trying to get a presentation. But you know, you got guys that swear by 8-pound test catching 6-pound bass. Now, do they lose a lot doing that? You doggone right. They'll lose more than they catch, but they might win the Bassmaster Classic throwing 8-pound test catching a 6-pound bass. But that might be the one big one they caught on that line. You know, I want to say it's everything about confidence. You know, I was never comfortable throwing clear blue ultra, what do they call that? Blue ultra, what's that blue line? That's how much I don't even know about it, because I quit using it years ago. That fluorescent blue. And you can see it in the water, so it works great. But guess what? If you can see it, the fish can see it too. So I went to clear. I use strictly clear line and I use heavy line. People say I'm crazy, but I haven't lost a fish in a tournament yet using heavy line, and I see guys break off on 6- and 8-pound test all the time. I'm like, dude, we're not trout fishing, man. You're looking for 4- to 6-pound largemouth and smallmouth. And those of you that have caught smallmouth and largemouth know that I'll tell you, they'll fight. They call them fighters for a reason. You know, I love throwing that heavy line. I'm confident with it, but I've learned to be confident with it. Do I throw braid? You betcha. You betcha I'll throw jigs on braid all day long. And I don't put a leader on there. I've seen guys go with 65-pound braid and they put an 8-pound leader. I'm like, what are you doing? The only thing that's going to work is that 24 inches, an 8-pound test. So you just spent all this money on this heavy line. Yeah, but I don't have to change my line out. No, you are changing that 24-inch section of leader. But hey, I don't knock any style of fishing, because I get beat all the time on things that I wouldn't do, and people get beat by me doing things that they wouldn't do. You just got to change things up, because usually you don't see the same guy as a champion every year, do you? It's usually somebody different. Everybody's beatable, but everybody has something that they use. I learn from people in the crowd all the time. So share information. The bottom line is have fun, go fishing. People are like, man, I want to go fishing. Then go fishing. You don't know if you're going to catch them till you get out there. The fish aren't going to come to you on the couch. You know, get out there and take those kids fishing. You know, go out there and learn something. Help the outdoors. All right, good deal. Hey, thanks for listening. I really appreciate it. It's good to see you guys. Hopefully you have a great time here at Bronzefest. Make sure you get around to see all the other vendors. Take a look at the baits. Matter of fact, Jeff Tatum's got some of them square bills that I got over there. He's got them right over there.